In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to add controls to the Essential Graphics panel, and we'll also share some tips on how to organize the panel to make it easier on the end user in Premiere Pro. So first we'll start in After Effects. We'll go to Window and select Essential Graphics. Make sure that panel is open. In the Essential Graphics panel, you'll select the composition that you want to export as the mogrt. So we're going to select the only comp that we have in this project. It's title 01. And we're going to give this mogrt a name. This mogrt name will also be the name of the clip inside of the Premiere Pro timeline. So before I get started adding controls to the Essential Graphics panel, I want to add some global controls for the title so the user can scale the main title and all its components at the same time while also giving them control over the size of the individual elements. So in this example, I'm going to add a null object. Let's go new, just right-clicking in the comp viewer, null object. Then I'm going to hold shift while I select all the layers except for the background, and I'm going to parent them to the null right there. So in this version of After Effects 15.0.1, the point controls and the scale properties are not supported in the Essential Graphics panel, meaning if I try to drag them into the panel, I'll get this error. The property type is not supported. So what we need to do is take just one extra step so we can add slider controls that can be dragged over into the Essential Graphics panel. So let's start with the position property. If we go to the Effects and Presets panel and search for Separate XYZ Position and double click to apply that, and you'll see that an expression has been applied to the position property. And if you go into the Effects and twirl down into the Separate XYZ Position, what we'll do is just select the X position slider and just drag it into the Essential Graphics panel. And I'm going to label this Global X Position. And we'll do the same thing for the Y. Just drag that into the panel. Global Y Position. This Separate XYZ preset, the slider range values, if you click on Edit Range, bring up this little box here, they're set to -1000 to 1000. That is fine for this project. You always want to test your sliders to be sure that the ranges are appropriate for your design, and also that they're not too small or too large, so that way the user doesn't kind of go off the rails and breaks your designs. So this is a good way to set up parameters for the user to work with. So if you wanted to change those values, you would just click on the blue text and an input field will appear and you can type your new value. We're going to keep these as they are because I think they're fine. So we'll click OK. Now we want to add a slider control to connect it to the scale property. So let's go back to the Effects and Presets panel and search for slider control. We'll click twice to apply that effect. And then the null layer, we'll twirl down to the transform properties. And then while holding down the Alt or Option key, click on the scale property stopwatch, and then make sure the slider is visible. Then you're going to select the Expressions pick whip and drag it to connect it to this slider control. That's all you need to do, just let go. And it'll disappear because the slider value default is set to 0, so we'll just change it to 100. And there you go. Now we can select a slider and drag it into the Essential Graphics panel and change the name. And this is where we definitely want to change the maximum value for this slider. So we'll click on the Edit Range text, and we're going to change the maximum value to, let's see, 130. We're going to test that. And we can go a little bit bigger. Let's see. We'll give the user up to 140. I think that's fine. The user can make it small or they can only make it about that big. So I'm happy with how these controls are set up. So what I want to do now is organize the Essential Graphics panel. And we'll do that by clicking the Add Comment button at the bottom of the Essential Graphics panel and using all caps, I'm going to label this Global Controls. I'm going to drag this on top of this group of controls. And then before I make my next section of controls, which will be for the text layer, or the main text layer, I'm going to add a blank comment field. And you do that by clicking the Add Comment button, and then just delete the word comment. So I'm ready to move on and make controls for the main text layer. Let's go ahead and add a header. So you click the Add Comment button, and then using all caps, we're going to label this Main Text Controls. And you can label that Top Text Controls, Text 01 Controls, anything that's going to be descriptive so the user can easily find the controls that they're looking for. A nice time saver that we can use to find properties that we can just easily drag into the Essential Graphics panel is this button that says Solo Supported Properties. So let's click on that, and you will see in the timeline all of the supported properties that can be dragged into the Essential Graphics panel. We don't need all of these, but it's nice to be able to just scroll through and find the ones that we need and drag them over. It makes this workflow a lot faster than having to twirl down into every little group and try to find the property that you're looking for. So in most mogrts, you're going to want the user to be able to change the text. So what we're going to do is drag the source text property into the panel. It's going to label this as well. And just as a side note, if you hit Enter or Return on your keyboard and then leave the second line blank, when you export the mogrt, it appears inside of Premiere with 2 text input fields. So as many times as you hit Enter, that's how many text fields or lines that will appear in Premiere, even though you can't visually see that here in After Effects. That's what it'll look like in Premiere. So just wanted to point that out, but we are just going to have one line of text, so I'm going to delete that, just have one line. So if we scroll down, we already have a fill effect applied to this layer. So the other supported property is color pickers. So we're going to just drag this color picker into the Essential Graphics panel and label it. And I already connected the scale property to a slider control, so I can also drag that into the panel. And make sure you give it a good descriptive label. Okay. So I can see that we don't have position property controls for the main title set up yet. So we're going to go back to Effects and Presets and look for the Separate XYZ position and apply that. Now if we click the Solo Supported Properties button again and scroll down, we should be able to see the sliders, and all we need to do is just drag them into the panel. Give them a descriptive name. So I think that's all the controls I think I'm going to give the end user in Premiere. So we are done with the main title. Now we can go to the subtitle or the second line of text and set up another group of controls for that layer. So in the Essential Graphics panel, let's go ahead and set up another section for the subtitle controls. So click on the Add Comment button and delete this comment so we can add a space. Click the Add Comment button again. We'll label this Subtext Control. And back in the timeline, select the source text property and drag that into the Essential Graphics panel. And we'll select the color picker property from the fill effect that was applied. Label that. And I see that we need to add a scale and position slider controls. We already have the Separate XYZ preset selected in the Effects and Presets panel, so we'll just double click to apply that. And now, scroll down, go to the Separate XYZ effect here. We can drag those properties into the Essential Graphics panel. They're labeled. There we go. And we also want to give the user control over the size or the scale. So we'll add another slider control. And I'm just going to hit E to bring up the slider. And I'm going to use Shift and then S to bring up the scale property. Hold down the Alt or Option key while clicking on the stopwatch. Use the expressions pick whip to connect it to the slider. And remember to change that value to 100. Drag that slider into the Essential Graphics panel. There we go. I'm going to edit that range. Let's see. I think that's big enough. So now I'd like to set up some controls for this rectangular box. I think I want to give the user control over the width and the height of this box and the stroke of this box and the color. Scroll down to the box layer. And if you scroll through here, you'll see a lot of properties that you can add to the Essential Graphics panel, but we won't use any of these stroke colors because I added a fill effect. And we can just select this color control and drag it into the Essential Graphics panel. But first thing we got to do is add another section. So we'll add a blank comment and add another comment, and then we can call this box controls. I think that's descriptive enough. Then we can drag this color picker into the Essential Graphics panel. So you can call it stroke or outline. I think outline is probably better. And we can also drag the opacity in there as well. We can give the user control over that. And then the other thing we said we wanted to add was the stroke width, and we can drag that from the shape layers. Earlier, I connected the two animated strokes to just one stroke width property. So all I need to do is just drag this stroke width property into the Essential Graphics panel. And we'll show you why you shouldn't do that. By default, you can't edit the range of this stroke width slider. And you'll see it's at 13 and it's way at the edge, and you can actually, it doesn't take much to go into the thousands. You'll need to add a slider control and connect that to the stroke width. We already have a slider control effect visible in the Effects and Presets panel, so double click to make sure the box layer is selected. Double click to apply that. And then we want to go all the way down to this slider control, and then hold Alt or Option while clicking on the stroke width stopwatch, and then again use the expressions pick whip to select a slider. Remember, change that value. I think it was 13. And now we can drag this slider into the Essential Graphics panel. Let's see. Box stroke width. So I'm going to go ahead and keep these labels consistent. There we go. And then by default, this slider value range goes up to 100, but I think that might be a bit much. So we can go ahead and constrain this value to maybe 50. So again, we want to use a separate XYZ position preset. And then I'm just going to hit E on my keyboard to just show the effects. And then we can just drag this slider into the panel. And label them. We also want to give the user controls over this line right here underneath the second text. So again, add another section. We'll just call this one line controls. We did not have a fill effect applied, but we can select the color from the stroke and drag that into the panel and give this a nice div label, just line color. We can also drag the opacity slider just in case the user wants to have control over that. And then same thing with position. We'll apply the separate XYZ preset and then drag that into the panel. Now for this line, I want to add a slider control so users can scale the width of that line. So I'm going to add a slider control and to hold Shift S to reveal just the scale property. We're going to click the Alt or Option key to create a simple expression. So we're going to type left bracket and then drag. Use your expressions pick whip to drag to the slider. So we're going to use that slider value for the width. And then add a comma. Then we're just going to pick whip this to its own value for the Y scale. And then close that with the right bracket. And you'll see it's 0. So we want to try to match that to what it looked like before. It looks about right. And now we can add this slider to the Essential Graphics panel. We'll name this line width C down there. Okay. So the last group of controls that I'd like to give the user are controls over the background. Back into the Essential Graphics panel, we're going to add another section for background controls. I want to give the user control over the colors. I have a gradient ramp effect applied to this shape layer. So all I'm going to do is just select the start color and drag that into the Essential Graphics panel. Now the end user might not know what start and end color means. What we can label this is just gradient. Gradient color 01. Then drag the end color picker into the panel. And we'll just relabel this. Gradient color 02. You can also just call it background color 01, background color 02. And then the last control I'd like to give the user is the background opacity. So I just select the opacity property and drag it into the panel. And if the user sets this opacity to 0, it will actually be transparent. People can overlay this title on their video while still having the text at full opacity. Okay, I think I'm done here. So if you're going to upload this to Adobe Stock, one of the requirements is to run the Expressions Universalizer script. And you can find that on aescripts.com. What this script does is just converts your expressions in your project so that they're compatible with After Effects running in any language. And when you export the mogrt, that will also ensure that those mogrts are able to be used in Premiere in any language. So I'm going to just run the script. And to go. Now we can click the Export Motion Graphics template. We do want to save it. So we want these two check boxes selected. It's going to check for Typekit compatibility just to make sure that the fonts that we selected are compatible or did come from Typekit, and to warn us if After Effects needs to be installed in order to use this mogrt in Premiere. And one of the times that that's applicable is if you're using the Cinema 4D renderer. You can use it, but you do have to have After Effects installed. And when someone tries to use that mogrt in Premiere without After Effects installed, you'll get a pop-up message telling you that. So this is just to make sure that you don't accidentally have the Cinema 4D renderer or some other incompatibility. We'll click OK. So if we go over to Premiere and we go to the Essential Graphics panel, and click on the Install Motion Graphics Template button and open it. We can now drag it into the timeline, and you can test the individual controls and make sure that everything works as planned.